So one of the topics that comes up in class is how do I get material moving around the system? So we're going to talk entirely about the entire storage system. So why are we doing this today? So you may have some curious questions about automatic and manual storage options within your StoreTEQ system, or even back to the days of the IntelliStore and TLF system. We're looking at, we've been running our system for, I don't know, months, maybe a couple of years. So we need some refresher on what we talked about when the system was initially established. Maybe things are changing. The question is, can my storage system do what we're talking to? Yes. Any of the storage systems that are utilizing WoodStore, doesn't matter how old your system is, what we're going to talk about today, everybody can do this. So it might also be that your system needs to evolve. The demand of panel material within your company has evolved. Now we need to store material outside of the system, but we still need it in the inventory so that we know currently on hand today, what do we have? So we'll talk about the differences between automatic and manual storage and how do we move those panels around. So a couple of things we'll talk about. We'll go through some other terms. We'll do a little refresher. We'll talk about different storage locations by groups versus the colors that we can establish for those. We'll talk about two methods of automatic material removal from the automatic system using the crane. We'll create a list to remove that material. We'll talk about the click and drag function. And then the last thing we'll talk about is how do we move material from the automatic storage to a manual storage position. Maybe we're moving material to a different building. So we still have it in inventory. We happen to have a saw that's in a secondary building. So we can move that material around electronically after we physically move those panels. So we'll talk about all those functions. So a little bit of background. So again, it doesn't matter if you have a system that is Barkstead, the IntelliStore, TLF. We then shifted from Barkstead to HOMAG Automation. And then the last shift we've done is we've gone strictly to the HOMAG name. We've gone from IntelliStore to StoreTEQ. It's the same system. All we've done is we've changed the logos and we've now changed the color to the white background with the black labeling. But it still runs the StoreTEQ software. It still runs the WoodStore system. So one of the things that's vitally important within the system, and anybody who's been running the system knows this. So if you are incorporating a saw and using CutRite, you've probably already created your board code list. We just bring that board code list up to the IntelliStore system or to the WoodStore system. But those board codes need to match. So they have to be identically the same between the two softwares. Otherwise, we start having communication issues. We have inventory issues. We may even start developing or designing phantom panels, and it just becomes a mess over time. So there really aren't any hard rules that what does your board code have to look like. Everybody has their own special opinion of that, but you are limited in special characters. So a lot of times we're just listing what is the core material, the thickness. Does it have a top coat? Is it white melamine? Is it a colored melamine? High pressure laminate? Are they plastic materials? And then we typically add in at the end the overall size of the panels. Now, one of the things that can help you with the system, and we're projecting down the road, is that our board codes typically record material type, the species if we're dealing with veneers, the color of the materials, high pressure laminate, we get into the plastics, solid surface materials, and obviously dimensions, and the panels are all weighed. But something else that can help us in the future is when we in-feed those panels to the system, we can identify where they came from, the manufacturer, a batch number, a lot number, if you will, so that if we have a problem with color and we have a shift in the shade of the material, maybe we can go back and pull those materials out of the system very quickly, and we can identify where the problem came from. But if we didn't provide that information on the in-feed, then all the system knows is that it's an MDF sheet with blue melamine. We can in-feed the date. Maybe we only want to hold on to our veneer material for a year. And at that year point, we notice that we have a problem with the veneers. They're starting to dry out. So we want to pull those veneer panels out very easily. Well, again, if we didn't track that by the date of in-storage, then that becomes much more difficult to find those panels. So this is an example of my demo software. This is what we typically build in the class. So if you're new to the IntelliStore system, if you're new to the StoreTEQ system, we have you build this in the classroom as an example of how to manipulate the software. So you'll notice that I've got multiple colors. There's all the identification numbers. So the colors are assigned to the groups. Could be something as simple as 4x8. Those are my light blue sections. So within that, I've got just a myriad of 4x8 panels. The purples are 5x8. The pink is 5x12. The orange are 5x10. The thin materials up at the top, the 600s, those are all my solid surface. And then you'll notice that there's two sections, two storage locations, and they're 22 and 40. They're shaded, so they're not a solid color. But that's where I do a prior removal or pre-stacking operation. You'll also notice that the machines, so 11 is my saw, 61 is my board coding table, and then I have 3 in-feed, out-feed locations, 1, 2, and 3. Now I can change the color on all the storage locations. I can design my own colors, a typical Windows system. But we can't change the color of the machines or the in-feeds, the conveyors. So I have 2 suggestions. If you're going to design your own colors for the groups, try to stay away from the dark colors. You can't change the shade of the numbering. So the dark shades, the numbers become very hard to read. There's a blue line that shows up on the edge of the board to show you the level of capacity. How much room do you have? Those become very difficult to see. And try to stay away from the bright green colors because that gets confusing. Is it a storage location or is it a machine? Is it a conveyor? So other than that, you can do whatever you need to with the colors. So let's talk about the difference between automatic storage and manual storage. Automatic storage is always referred to as being manipulated by the crane. So it's within the safety boundary, so within the fence system. Manual storage is external. It could be in another building. It could be just a stack of material that is positioned someplace in the facility that we're waiting to use, or maybe it's a material that's being stored for a future job coming up. So transfer options. We can transfer panels within the storage system. So we can move materials around if we need to manually optimize where we put these panels. Maybe when we first started with the system, we didn't project far enough ahead as to the variety of panels. Maybe we want to help the system. But the system will also start looking at optimization on its own based upon how we set the panels. We can also move materials from the in-feed to the internal storage, or we can pull materials out from the automatic storage to the in-feed. It could be that we have a problem with the material, we need to send it back to the manufacturer. Could be that we're pulling that material out because a job got canceled. Now we're either going to store it or we're going to send it back. Could be that we're sending it to another machine in the facility that isn't incorporated with the automatic system. So there's a myriad of reasons we would do that. Now we can also move material from manual storage to the in-feed, or from the in-feed out to manual storage. You'll notice that I put the note in here that there's a function within WoodStore called fill positions. So this makes your job much easier. And we'll talk about fill positions toward the end of this session. Now you can move materials also within the automatic to manual, and then we can move the panel materials from manual to manual. So maybe we have 2 different manual storage locations. again, maybe we have a secondary building. So all these materials are held by inventory. So at any moment, you can determine whether you have enough material for a job coming up, or we need to expedite an order because we're going to come up short. So some names that we throw around. Anytime I'm talking the crane, I'm talking vertical lift and rotation. So our crane will rotate 0 to 90 and 90 back to 0. It will not do a 360-degree move. We can only store materials on 0 and 90. And then the bridge is what moves the crane in the Y direction across the storage system, or in the length in the X direction of the storage system. We talked about machines and in-feed locations. They're all designated by specific numbers, but they're all designated by that bright green color. We talked about prior removal or pre-stacking materials. So you can designate any location in your storage system as a prior removal or pre-stacking location. That way, when you're at home overnight, lights out, your system can pre-stack the material so that at 7 o'clock in the morning, your sawyer comes in, he's already got a stack of random material that he's ready to run. You can always run any production list, but you have to keep in mind that from lift to drop anywhere in the system is usually somewhere between 30 and 45 seconds. So depending on how buried the material is, you could be waiting several minutes for the crane to gain access to that material. So again, a lot of customers are doing a lot of prior removals, and sometimes they designate 2 locations that are just specifically prior removal. I talked about storage locations. So I have 4x8, 5x8, 5x12, 5x10. I've got solid surface materials. And then I've got 2 locations. They're still 4x8, but I specifically told them they're in the group veneer. So that's where all my real wood veneers go. So I can be very specific about where I store that material. So again, we talked automatic storage. That's within the system. It's within the safety boundaries. If you think automatic storage, think the crane. So how do we remove material? The easiest is click and drag. So you can click and drag a stack within the automatic system. So I can go from one location to another. I can drag that material out of the system. I can drag it back in. What it's going to do is it's going to pop up a display that'll say, this is where you're coming from. In this illustration, I'm going from 124 to my in-feed number 2. And it says I have 25 sheets of material in that stack. Okay, I have the choice. How many do I want to move? Anywhere from 1 all the way up to the full stack of material. But I can't pick and choose. So that's where removal from storage list comes in. So within the removal storage, now I tell it I need these materials. Might be that we got a bad set of materials, we've got an off color. Well, if I was smart enough and I put the system in from a distributor, then I can make a list and say, pull all the blue panels that came from this supplier. Right below that icon, you'll see remove to in-feed. That's the start button. So we click on the list, we create the list, and then we tell it remove to the in-feed. So in this list, you'll notice that I've got the board codes, the quantity of the panels, and then the position number. Where do I want these to go? So within one list, within one removal list, I'm going to location 1, location 2, and location 3. They're coming from a specific supplier. So I've got some panels from Panels R Us, Veneer Specialists, and then the white material, it didn't come from anybody specific, but I need to pull those panels out. Could be by order number, could be by batch number. Again, I can pull them out by date. So I've got a lot of variables that I can throw in here. When it's doing the removal list, sometimes the display will pop up with this icon that says convert. What it is, it's uncovering. So it's converting panels from one location to another to gain access. It's removing that overburden. So the system will do that, and you'll see that pop up several times, especially if your system is much more configured for random storage. Again, we talked manual storage. You can create as many manual storage locations that you need within the software. And the last thing we'll talk about is this fill positions function. So I'm moving material from a manual storage to an in-feed. I could easily delete the panels from the manual storage and then re-enter all those panels on the in-feed. Time consuming and tedious. Plus, I can make mistakes. So why not electronically move that material from manual to in-feed? Okay, so I'm gonna start my IntelliStore system or my WoodStore software. So here's my configuration. Again, you'll notice that my colors have shifted a little bit. So 126 and 125, those are my veneered panels. 101, 102, and 103. Those are specifically 4x8 material, but they're in 3 colors, red, green, and blue. They're 19 millimeters thick. If I open up 101, and now we look at the stack, here's my board code, the material code, material description, but these weren't established by any supplier. So really I can't pick and choose within that system. But if I look at 500, now 500 has my 5x10 material, but you'll notice that they're by random suppliers and this whole stack has been jumbled. So if I want to remove those materials, now I can tell it I need all the panels that came from Bob's Panels. I make the list, I tell it to start outfeeding those panels, and the crane does all the work for me. So a little bit of demonstration. So this is my stack of white melamine material. So if I left click and drag, notice all the other locations turn gray. So there's only 2 locations that my white material can go to, and those are controlled by the groups. So I'm going to move to location 3. It says I'm going from 131 to number 3, and there's 25 panels. Well, I only need 12. So we click OK. So now the crane is going to move those. Now, obviously, my demonstration software is running slightly faster than the real system. Again, we could do this in real time, but we'd be here forever. I can move that material back in, or I could just come over to the function buttons, click on F5, and infeed to storage. Now, once you infeed to storage, you're turning it over to the computer. The computer then says, let me look at the groups and let me figure out where these panels need to be stored. So we need to remove some of the color materials. So we go to 101, I drag it to location number 1. Again, going from 101 to 1, I want 10 panels. Yep, move all of them. So naturally, I get some errors. Let's look and see what's going on with it. That was an error with my panel size and the size of the infeed. They're very close, but it did move all those materials. So it was giving me a warning. So maybe I want to go back to my board code list and look and verify that my panel is the actual right size in the software. So sometimes you'll get messages. They're just telling you what's going on with the system. It didn't fault the operation. It was just giving me a notification. So we're going to drag those back in. So again, click and drag, super easy. Now, if we come down to F3, click on Functions, go to List for Removal. So now within this list, I double click, pull up the board code that I need. So I need those blue panels. Now you want to be very careful of this All Panel Codes option. If you click All Panel Codes, so if I come out of here and remove that material and go to All Panel Codes, it tells me there are 155 panels in the system, and I'm removing all of them. I'm gutting my system because I need to move locations. I have to reconfigure my storage. Think very carefully before we do this. So again, you want to be careful of all panel codes. So we'll go back to the blue. We're going to go to location number 2. The supplier, I didn't put a supplier name in. I can't pull up by batch number. I can't pull up by order. but I can then tell it how many panels do I need to pull. So I could go in and tell it I want all of those panels. Click OK. Now I can drop over to the function bar and click F4, or I can exit back out to my main storage and click Remove to Infeed. So if you look at this, 10 panels. That's interesting. Let me try the green panels.
Phil, I think you might be using the wrong board code there. Try using the second blue option. Yeah, try that one. I think that was what was.
Oh, you're right. I was. Thanks, Ian.
Sure.
Yeah. So I was actually pulling from my 5x8 material, and there are no panels in there. So we'll go back. Location number 2. I want all 10 panels. I can still double click, pull up the green panels, grab the right size this time. Go to location number 3. So within one list, I'm telling the system to move multiple panels out of the system. So now I go F12 and remove to Infeed. So again, I'm getting that message telling me that I have a size disparity. So I can stop those messages from popping up. I have a freeze command. So again, it was just a notification saying that there was a disparity within that. So here's all my panels. I've completely emptied those from the system. So again, we go into functions, list for prior removal, and then remove to infeed is the start button that moves those panels. Now I need to move those panels to a manual storage location. Okay, so I right click, go to storage locations, and I want to look at rack 1. So what do I have available here? So if I double click on 5006, I can see what my group is. And these are all 4x8 panels. If I click on 5004, these are all my white melamine. And 5010, these are my 5x10 materials. So the problem I have is I have no place for these blue panels to go other than they go into a 4x8 location under manual storage. So I'm going to take them from one group in the automatic storage, and I'm just going to put them in a generic 4x8. So I need to move those to location 5003. So I click Edit, Fill Positions. Now I have multiple options in here. So I can move a specific panel code. I can go from a source to a target. I can move an entire stack. I can even click and drag these. So we're going to move an entire stack from a source to a target. So we're going to go from location number 1. And we're going to put it in 5000. So I come down and I click Book. It's moved that material electronically from the infeed location to my manual storage. So 5000 now has the 10 panels of the red material. I right click, back to automatic storage. Number 1's empty. Much faster than deleting the material and then going back to the manual storage and re-entering that material. So we'll do that again, only this time we're going to go into Fill Positions. So we're going to click and drag. So my source is number 2. We're going to go to 5001. And what I do is I highlight all the material. Left click and drag. When I hit close, location 2 is empty. And I've just moved all that material to 5002. So very quickly, I can use the list. I can designate which panels I need. I can do multiple panels into one location. So if I go into list for removal, so let's look at the veneers. So I need the cherry veneer material going to location 2. I've got 10 panels in there. I only need 5 of them. So we're also going to pull the red oak veneer. That's also going to go to location 2, and we need 5 of those. And then we'll pull up the Honduran mahogany and do the same thing. Location 2, we need 5 of these. So you can create a list of the required materials. Exit, go back to remove to infeed. Move the veneered materials. What you're going to see is that it's going to move a certain number of panels, and then it may have to do a conversion. We're lucky it didn't. So here's my Honduran mahogany, here's the red oak, here's the cherry. So that's all Honduran mahogany. So here's my red oak, and it's buried underneath the cherry veneers. So I'm going to go to list for removal, create a new list for the red oak material, go to location 1, and I want the remaining 5 panels. So when I click remove, you're going to see the convert function pop up. So it's moving all the cherry panels off of the red oak, converting that over to location 125 so that it can gain access to the red oak panels. The nice thing about the remove to storage list is that once I create the list and start it, then I can continue on with my day. I don't have to stand by the system and manipulate it. I don't have to do things by hand. So how do we do, Ian?
Great job, Phil. I just have one quick question for you. Can you explain again why it's important to move the panels physically first before we do any kind of work with the fill positions electronically?
That's a good question. So look at your system, and somebody left a panel on the infeed. So it's in the infeed location, the proximity switch is activated, the crane knows that there's material there, and it only knows what you've told it. So if you electronically move the panels, if you use the fill position and you move it from manual storage to location number 1, the system immediately thinks that there's 20 sheets of red material there. And if the saw calls up that material, it's going to come over and start accessing that material. So my preference and my recommendation is have the fork truck driver move the material physically so that when we have that location occupied, it isn't told what's there until we use the fill position. Much less chances of having the crane do something that's unexpected. That's a good question, Ian. Thanks for asking that.
Sure. Well, Phil, I'm going to take over control one more time here from you. And just encourage anyone out there who is listening, if you have any questions for Phil, please share them using the Q&A window. We're happy to take some time right now. Phil can field any of those questions that you may have relating to your WoodStore system and removing material. Remember, this is, again, dealing with both manual and automatic storage. So whether that's manual, any kind of storage outside of the system, or any kind of automatic storage that's done by inside the system, we can address any kind of questions that you might have there. And Phil, I'll ask you to just stay on for just a second and see if any questions